Okay, so we're about to start. I'm gonna check on my timing. Hey, more people are joining. Okay, so we'll start, and I think people are gonna continue to join. Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you so much, Louis, for joining today. I'm Rita Casaverde. I am the chair of the SLO County Democratic Party, and today we are going to be presenting our first SLO County Democratic panel through Zoom, which I'm really excited about. And it's called Communications in a Time of Uncertainty. And we thought it was very important for us to just make a minute and kind of evaluate the tools that we now have available to us and kind of evaluate what has happened in the last couple of months and how we've all been responding from organizations and our own companies and learn from really the best. Today I have Andrea Chmelik. I met Andrea at Women's March. She has been doing an amazing job there as communication director. But Andrea, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for having me, Rita, and hi to everybody who's joining us today. So I joined the Women's March in 2016 after the election, but my first exposure really to social media and to communications was after my son was born, and I realized I'm stuck at home with a baby that never sleeps in a completely new city where I don't know anybody. And so the only way of communicating at the time for me was Facebook, to stay in touch with any normal social life. And that is essentially how I became proficient in that medium. And so that was sort of a lead for me. Eventually, I started volunteering for a couple of local organizations and helping them out with their social media. And then when the Women's March came around, I jumped in and was able to use those skills for that. So that's mostly my background. And then I also work with Rock Harbor Marketing, which is a social media managing digital strategy and marketing based in Morro Bay.
Nice, nice. And we also have Louis Camassa, one of my dear friends. We both love national parks a lot, and I talk about it every time because we just love national parks so much. But Louis, you are a partner at Empath, is that right? And
That's right.
You have been doing a lot of brand and also marketing. Do you mind letting us know a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me here. I'm honored to help our local community, which is a big part of Empath. And what we are is we're a brand and marketing consultancy, and we use empathy to understand our clients' customers' wants and needs. And we use that understanding to develop marketing that really speaks to them and helps motivate purchasing decisions. And part of our way of giving back to the local community is we go to different types of opportunities like this. We go to local schools, municipalities, and other events to speak and help, and we all do that per gratis. So if there's anybody that needs a speaker, we're happy to help.
Thank you so much, and thank you both of you for making time today. I know we're all pretty educated on Zoom, but I think we're gonna try to keep it till 6 p.m. so people can just go home and forget about Zoom for a little bit, because I'm sure you're both being in meetings already all day. So I wanted to start. I'm gonna share my screen. Hoping that this goes smoothly. Let me know if you guys can see my screen.
Yeah. Looking good.
Yay. Okay, so I want to start by talking a little bit about just who are we speaking to. You know, in the Democratic Party, one thing that we wanted to make sure we understood at the beginning when we're just trying to come up and organize our communication efforts was just trying to understand our voters. But the audience definitely depends on the type of organization, you know, type of business that you do. But I did want to start talking a little bit about the audience. How important do you guys think it is that of defining your audience before anything regarding communications? And do you think that it's, in your experience, have you seen that the audience kind of adapts to the product or the service or the value that you're adding? Or have you seen that it's sometimes the opposite, that sometimes you just put something out and then the audience kind of forms itself? So I'll give you a minute if anyone wants to jump into that.
So
Yeah.
I can tell you a little bit, yeah, sorry.
I knew we were doing it at the same time.
I would, you know, it obviously depends on whether you're an organization, whether you're a movement, whether you are a local nonprofit, or whether you're a business. It's going to define a little bit of who your audience is going to be and how you're going to start targeting that audience. But, you know, whatever your goal is, whether it is an individual or as an organization, the reason why you want to share your message is because you're passionate about it. You have a purpose, you have something that you believe in, and you believe that it would benefit others. So initially, when you're getting your message out, and this is my experience as from the Women's March Analyst Obispo, you know, it will be made for people who are already on board, they are aligned with your goal, and then they will be joined by people who might not yet be actively involved, but who will respond to your message when they hear it. And then further down the line, obviously, you can fine tune your messaging so that you target broader audience. With Women's March Slow, you know, we were created as a response to an election that was viewed as harmful to certain groups and certain hard-won rights, I'd say. And so it was centered around women as a response to misogyny and sexism. And so the first people who connected with us were those who felt similar and had the same goal in mind. But now, 4 years down the road, you know, the audience is shaped by the events that have taken place and by the work that we have put in as an organization. So I think that with us in particular, it was the idea first, and then, you know, we knew what our goal and our message and our mission was, and then, you know, a part of the audience came along immediately, and then the rest took some work, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Louis, have you had that same experience where the audience kind of forms organically, or do you have any observation on that?
From a business standpoint, it's really challenging to organically grow an audience because you're selling something. So you're trying to bring people to you to sell them. You know, it's challenging to do that in a business sense unless you have a really polarized view. And a lot of brands have that polarized view where they put a stake in the ground and they're not shy about expressing their views, and they'll attract people that align with those views, and they repel people that don't. I think audience is most important, probably the most important thing to business. And having worked with as many brands as we have, many of them have failed because they focus too much on their product or their service or trying to make money, and they didn't spend enough time understanding their audience. And it just goes to show you, like, today's day and time, if you look at some of the biggest companies out there, you know, Pandoras and the Spotifys and, you know, Facebooks and YouTubes and Instagrams, I mean, they were wildly successful before they even generated revenue because they built up such a large audience. And they, you know, for some of them, they had sold for billions of dollars. And the reason for that is because they created an amazing audience of people that believed in what they were doing, and they offered a great product to that audience because they understood that audience needs and desires. So I think it's, you know, the challenge is how do you build an audience? Does it happen organically, or is it something that you put effort into? I think it comes down to your message. And a great case in that is I started building my LinkedIn profile about 3 years ago. And I had about 500 connections on there. Didn't really have many people that I didn't know. I'm like, let me go out and start building. I'm just going to go and just build as large as an audience as I can. I don't know exactly who I'm going to connect with, but I'm going to connect with as many people as I can. And I started doing that. I was going after quantity. How many people can I connect with? And in about a year's time, I connected with 30,000 people. So I have this massive audience of 30,000 people at my fingertips. But guess what? They're not aligned with anything I believe in. I just went and randomly connected with people. So the messaging I put out doesn't align with their wants and needs, so it doesn't get much engagement. If I did things, now I'm trying to remove people, right, and go back to an audience that really aligns with what I do.
Yeah, and we're actually seeing that a lot, right, where an audience is created, and then depending on the message, especially now in these times that so many things have changed so quickly, there's a lot of audience that comes and goes, just because things have changed. And some businesses we have seen that have stood their ground and said, no, these are our values, and if you don't align, that's completely fine. But if you do, we love your business, and this is who we are, and we hope it works out, the relationship. And I know with Women's March, regarding audience, when Women's March started, before I was involved in the movement, I know that when you guys organized the first March in SLO, you had no idea what that audience was going to be like.
Right.
And then suddenly the day came, and how many people attended? Or how many people were you expecting? How many people?
Yeah, well, so originally, I believe when the original permit was pulled for 300 people, and then we ended up with close to 10,000. So it was really unexpected.
Yeah, so it kind of goes a little bit to what Louis was talking, right? Like when there is a message that will drive people, that audience can be built like in a minute. But yeah, it's very interesting. And how have you guys noticed audience changing now with the uncertain times, or the COVID, and now Black Lives Matter movement and protests and the stands that businesses, organizations have taken? How have you guys noticed your audience change? I'll let Louis start this time.
I think that's a challenging question, because the audience hasn't changed, but I think what has changed is some of their beliefs, and some of their needs have changed. So when this crisis first hit, people weren't going out of their house, so they had to adapt and start adopting new behaviors like shopping online. For the majority of people, they were still shopping in stores. So once that stay-at-home mandate came out, people were forced to go online and shop. And that's not necessarily a new audience, it's a change in behavior of an existing audience. And then with all the social and civil unrest, you have people, that same audience now, looking for brands to do more and to stop saying but doing. They say all the right things, but are they actually doing what they say? And I think some people are calling them out. It's like, hey, you're saying all about equality, you're saying all these good things, but what are your actions? And I think that's the next thing is, let's just not hear what they're going to do. Let's actually see them do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Have you seen a change during the last couple months, or since COVID and Black Lives Matter protests started with Women's March, or any other company that you work with, Andrea?
I had the same comment as Louis had when he started talking about, the audience is still there, and it is essentially the same. It is mostly the attitude and their focus that changed. And so I noticed a couple things. One is, that the means of communication and interactions are changing, mostly due to the COVID crisis, where we were asked to stay at home. And so a lot of people who were not active on social media before, or were hesitant to spend too much time on it, started using it more often, because it was a way of staying in touch and with the latest news, right, of what was happening now. The downside to that is that a lot of people I see also burning out on that and saying, I need to take a break because it's overwhelming. And then the second thing that I noticed is that, as we said, the existing audience hasn't changed, but they're paying attention to slightly different things. And, we've seen this before, though. It's not just COVID crisis and the Black Lives Matter with the Women's March, for example. And this is just one of many examples. Our audience already supported women's rights and Me Too movement. But when Dr. Ford was testifying during the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh to Supreme Court, the focus of our audience at the time narrowed down to why women don't report sexual assault and abuse. And while they were already aware of the sexual assault problem in our society, now they paid attention to this particular issue that women of women not reporting. And so we're sort of seeing a similar thing happening here, that our audience for Women's March is already on board with our mission, but now they are seeing things from a little bit different perspective. They're paying attention to what Black Lives Matter activists have to say, and they are seeing much more of the picture that they ever paid attention to before.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you, Andrea, especially on the point that you made on people feeling a lot of very overwhelmed lately, just because we have kind of been forced to plug ourselves digitally because of COVID, and now we're digitally very plugged in, observing everything that is happening. And a lot of the images are very strong and a reality that we have to pay attention to. But it can be very, very overwhelming, like it has been overwhelming for the Black community for a long time. So with this never ending stream of information and channels, how do you guys organize the message that you're going to put out? Have you had to reevaluate the different channels of communication that you use, or have you seen any change lately with the communication tools or just the channels that you have been using to communicate during COVID and during just everything that has been happening? I'll let Andrea go.
Yeah, so for me, I think the biggest change was Zoom, and there are obviously other options that are similar, but for us, we have realized that we are not going to be able to do events in person, and had to completely reevaluate how we are going to engage our audience, because our mission doesn't stop just because different things are happening. And so what we have done mostly was brainstorm and come up with an idea of how we can continue having a conversation with our audience. And so we actually started these weekly Wednesday calls with women at the forefront of the COVID crisis. And it was the one way of how we could stay connected. And then with that, of course, we're continuing all the channels that we have been using before. Social media for us, it is Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And so I would say for us, the biggest change definitely was the Zoom, and just figuring out how we can get in touch sort of in person as well as we can.
Yeah. And I know that for grassroots organizations like Women's March or like volunteer base, also capacity might be a limiting factor for when you guys select the type of channels. I know you send newsletters, you have Facebook. What other channels are you using right now for Women's March or for other organizations that you're working with?
Those are the ones that I use the most. Obviously email is always important to stay in touch with. And I have not used it for any organization yet, but I have been appreciating TikTok lately a lot, just because that is the relief, right, that you need. And I can see, obviously there are businesses or organizations where your audience is at, and that's where you should be targeting them. I think that there is potential for Women's March targeting a younger audience, but I think that you also have to have somebody in charge of that understands that the younger audience, that is authentic, as opposed to just trying to make something work because that's what's in right now.
That's true. Although I totally see you doing TikTok.
Yeah, don't say that.
Louis, and I know that you are more focused on the industry, like what's the latest technology, the latest tools, the latest channels. And I know that you do a really good job at following like the trends and kind of getting insights of these changes. So how, I know we probably, like, I think you mentioned as we were preparing for this panel that you could talk about tools for days, but how do you recommend either a business or a nonprofit to decide on what channels they should be focusing on and how to keep track of those channels?
It always comes down to audience, right? So it goes back to that first discussion we had and who your audience is and what their wants and needs are, and finally where they hang out. And I think for most of us, our audience is going to be in multiple different places. They're probably going to be a little bit on Facebook, a little bit on Instagram. Maybe for some of the white collars, they'll be on LinkedIn. Maybe some of the younger generation and some more savvy are going to be on TikTok. Quibi is a new video platform that's come out and is getting some good market share. It has some great advertising opportunity. So those are more the digital platforms. Obviously, out of home is changing now that people aren't going to be driving by billboards as much, although that's coming back. So it's about knowing who your audience is and where they hang out. And I think a good rule of thumb is email is always, one of the best marketing channels that you can leverage for the best price. So having a newsletter, sending out that newsletter regularly, I would say at the very least once a month. I have had success with clients sending it out once a week or once, even in some cases, some clients send out once a day. Depends on your audience, right? But to go back to the tools to organize, this is really important, right? Is once you understand your audience, you know who they are. Like we were working with one client and they were going after healthcare practitioners, specifically those in HR. And at first we were going and looking at Facebook and Instagram and they were really hard to find. And we switched over to LinkedIn. We started doing searches for HR professionals in healthcare and we hit a gold mine of potential prospects. Now we started connecting with them, sending messages. We did some paid media. We started bringing them in to the fold and creating communication and messaging and dialogues. So if you look at your audience, where they hang out, and then you align your messaging with that, the next step is what tools can you use to organize that? And I think the first thing is getting yourself a project management system, which allows you to organize your projects, like who your audience is, what you need to send them, when you're going to send it, finding out exactly what that call to action is for that. And you put that into a system that allows you to manage it, set timelines, put budgets to it. A great one to use that has been around for a while is Basecamp by 37 Signals. Another one that's really popular now is Trello. And what's cool with Trello is you can put together a content schedule. So what you could do is put together an editorial calendar that shows what you're going to publish, when it's going to get published, to what channels, with what message. So now you have a really nice timeline of the content, where it's going to go out, when it's going to go out. And that allows you to stay up to date and make sure that your messaging isn't only aligned, but it's also getting sent out in a good cadence. And that's really most important, is marketing is about frequency. And when you're repeating over and over again, that's going to help memorization.
Yeah, that's great. Wow, so much good stuff there. I have to disclaim that I did not tell Louis to mention Trello because that's one of the tools that we're looking at. I just had to stay organized. So happy that you mentioned it though. And totally, so you have your audience, you know what message, where they hang out, so you choose the channels, you organize, you mentioned cadence and frequency. Have you seen, Louis, the frequency, cadence, or anything change now because of how uncertain the times are right now? Has that had any impact on that frequency or that cadence?
It's really amazing to me how brands have slowed down their marketing. A lot of brands have pulled back their budget due to the crisis, not because of customer or client sentiment, but because of budget. Marketing is one of the first things that's usually cut in big companies and even small companies when times are tough. So what that means is there's opportunity, right? And on the flip side of every crisis is opportunity, as my friend Howard Weiner would say. And what that means is for those that are slowing down, it gives us opportunities for those that want to push down on the gas pedal a little bit and go forward. So I have seen a huge slowdown in paid media. And if you look at the stats, it's down across the board, anywhere from 20 to 30%. And I think with the new Facebook boycott that's going on, that's a small significant portion of that, although a lot of their revenue comes from small business. So the bigger brands that are boycotting, it's not having a big impact. But this is an opportunity not to slow down, but to be more refined in who you're messaging in, what your message is, and then keep reaching out, communicating. I mean, here's the key thing during a crisis or any type of event is keep communication open, keep it frequent, keep it authentic, and don't be cliche. Don't go out and say the same thing everybody else is saying. So I would say it is a slowdown, especially direct mail, print mail, big, huge slowdown there. What does that mean? Well, anybody that wants to send out a postcard or a letter to a prospect, now's the time to do it, because post office, it's been like 30 to 40% decrease in mail being sent out, which means you're going to be one of the only pieces of mail in that mailbox. You're going to get great visibility.
Interesting. That's good. And Andrea, have you noticed any change on the frequency, the cadence of the channels that you have been using?
Yes, I think that there's been a bit of a struggle, obviously from the financial perspective as well. But I think especially at the very beginning, well, at the very beginning, everybody was sort of in shock, and nobody really knew what was appropriate and what was not. And people just were genuinely affected by, you know, what was going to happen with them. But I think, and again, this is as Louis said, right? You need to find your way in, and it's sort of, I take it as our responsibility as communication people to keep that leadership and connecting with people, to give them something that can carry them over this period, right? Because people are struggling and they need to find something that keeps them going and that helps them get through the day. And you have a huge opportunity there to be the person who, you know, can send out a message. And it can be a message of hope. It can be a message of honesty, right? This is how things are. This is what we're doing. It can be a message of sharing your own experience and asking people how they connect with it. And it can be a message of humor, because as difficult as things get, that's what gets it through at the end of the day. And so I have definitely noticed, not just from us, but from other organizations that I follow, that there's been a bit of a slowdown and more of a quiet space. But I do think that that's when, and sometimes it's hard, right, to get back on that message. But I do think that that's just one of the things where you have to realize that it is a huge opportunity, and it's something that we're going to be looking back at, and, you know, seeing that, you know, we did this and we made it through, and, you know, this is how we've done it. So yeah,
it's definitely honesty and authenticity. Yes, I think that the best brands and companies and nonprofits that I've been not only started following, but following even more, have been those that have been sharing an authentic message of, you know, this is who I am, you know, even if it's a Instagram influencer that I followed before, and they just kind of showed everything, you know, this is how the crisis has hit us, and it just makes it more human. I think right now there's so much of that it's people are craving just that human connection. So as you are preparing your message, and you obviously want to make sure that you are engaging with your audience engaging back, is there anything that you recommend to make sure that that engagement continues growing with whatever message you put out? And I'm going to ask the audience if they have any questions. We're going to get to questions in a little bit. If you have any questions, you can choose Q&A and just enter your questions, and we'll be organizing them and asking a little bit. But back to the question, I don't know, Louis, if you have any tips on how to make sure that your message is engaging, and just how do you make sure that the audience keeps engaged with what you're doing?
Yeah, I think if you're okay, I could share my screen and show a little bit of how we do our process, and I'm happy to share this too with others that would want it. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes.
So this is an empathy map, and whenever we work with a client, this is one of those steps that we take to really understand their audience. Messaging comes down to audience, right? It's about what you're saying to the audience that cares. And I've made the mistake many times to care too much about the product or the features or the service, and I didn't care enough about the customer that was using it. So what we do is we go through this process and we define a sub-segment of our audience. And typically businesses will have multiple segments. Not everyone's exactly alike, but we try to get as close as we can. And we go through this process, we put a face in there, we put a name to it, and we think about what that person says and does, right? So if you were to take a subsegment of your customer, your user base, and you said, well, what behaviors do they have? You know, how do they describe them? So we're getting to the psychographics here. The demographics are, you know, how old they are, where they work, you know, what their household income is. That stuff's pretty easy to figure out. The psychographics is what they feel and what they see and what they hear. It's a little bit harder. We have to speculate a little bit. So you think about what they feel and think. You think about what they see out there through their lens and their prisms in life, and what they hear. Most importantly, what is their pain? So when you take your messaging and you convert that messaging into talking about their pain, you know, aligning how you could help resolve their pain, especially if you're a nonprofit, is if you're doing good in this world, well, it means you're helping alleviate and remove the bad, right? So if you focus on bad first, it gets people's attention. It shocks them. Oh, wow, there's something bad like that out there. Oh, and these guys are helping fix it. Well, I want to help them. So you can really build this great community of individuals that want to help and back you, and you build all these ambassadors. So when you go through this, you develop this for your segment, you print it out, you put it on your wall. Every message you write, you think about that person. You think, hey, is this going to resonate with them? Is this going to inspire them? Is this going to motivate them to act? This is so important in what we do, is understanding our customers and understanding how they feel. And I think if you started with this is a great point, great place to really align your message to your audience.
Yeah, and I've seen, thank you so much for sharing this, because it kind of puts a visual or a process to what a lot of grassroots organizations locally have to go through, kind of learn by doing and by failing, even though in the industry, in the marketing or brand industry, it's more of a ABC kind of step, right? So that's kind of one of the reasons we wanted to do this panel, is just to kind of show the tools, the processes that have been put in place for what can be considered as a brand. Although when you have a nonprofit or a grassroots organization, you yourself have a brand. Is there anything else that you would like to show here, Louis? And it's really cool stuff.
Yeah, so after we do that, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. But one other thing I wanted to show, I think is really important, is going through your macro customer journey. And what that means is looking at the pre-purchase, the purchase, and the post-purchase experience. And if you're a nonprofit or if you're not selling anything, this is still the same. It's about how they find out about you. That's the pre-purchase, meaning, are they hearing about you through word of mouth? Are they seeing a post on Facebook? Are they driving by a billboard? Are they getting something in the mail? Those are all the experiences they get before they commit to doing something with your business. The purchase experience, think of them at the point of sale, checking out the counter, or buying online, or coming in to learn more about your organization, or walking in a march, or making a vote, whatever that action is. That's the step you want to get them to. And you want to look at that experience. How easy is it for them to buy? How easy is it for them to sign up or donate or vote? Is the experience smooth, and is it seamless? Is there obstacles that need to be overcome? And then the third one, which most businesses, nonprofits, almost everybody forgets about, is post-purchase or post-action. So after they've taken an action, after they've voted or they've walked or they've donated or they've made a purchase, what are you doing? What kind of continuity program do you have set up to engage and continue communication and ultimately lead them to not only reuse your services, but become an ambassador and recommend others? So if you line out all of those there and you start thinking about those, that'll help you create a better experience for not only your existing customers, but to bring in new ones.
Mm-hmm. And this can be, like you said, right, broken down also not only for businesses that have a product that are selling, but for any message, really. I know Women's March, we have, even though our hands end up hurting a little bit, but after every march, to sponsors and supporters, try to send a thank you card. And it could be from a thank you card to a message of how the event went. What are the kind of the post-purchase activities that you have seen, Andrea?
With the post-purchase one, well, we get feedback about, what was appreciated, what could be better the next time. I think that for a lot for what we do, it is from one thing to another. We kind of head usually from one event straight to the other, and it is a little bit less planning, less long-term planning involved in a certain extent, because you do not know what is coming. So for us, there is a lot of reaction going on. But I think that it is, for us, it's huge that once people actually do come out to an event, whether it is a march, whether it is a panel, whether it's, something else, they actually get to experience what is it that we're trying to accomplish. They get that idea about, this is the community we're trying to build, right? They get to be surrounded by the people who are on the same mission, who are pushing for the same goal. And so I think that is the greatest thing that they have when they leave, is that they realize that, you know, it's not just them, they're not alone, and that that is possible, right? Building a community and building a future that, you know, we are hoping to build is not just some dream that, you know, we are hoping to achieve, but it's something that we actually can do if everybody shows up. So I think that is the biggest thing that, you know, people who are following Women's March can get out of those events, because there's one thing to follow somebody on social media, right? And it is nice to see the pictures, and it's nice to see the graphics, and it's nice to read articles that, you know, educate you and expand your point of view, and make you, you know, often make you feel like a part of the community, because you identify with what you're reading. But it is something else when you actually get to experience it in person.
Yeah, and I know with Women's March, you yourself have put a lot of work into creating an experience that also drives people into action. I know that the Action Alley was one of the main elements of the march as well. How did that come about? Like how do you, as either Women's March or with organizations, how do you make sure that there is an action to what you're doing?
That is one of our goals always, is that there has to be a call to action, and it has to be something that is easily achievable for people. So it is something where you give them options and they literally just need to pick it up. So with the call to action alley, for example, that's what we call it. At every annual March in January, we invite nonprofit organizations that are aligned with our mission to Mitchell Park. And so they come and they, you know, talk to the thousands of people there about who they are and what they do and what kind of help they need. And then people can sign up, you know, for their newsletters, and they can volunteer for them, or they can apply for a job with them, or they can support them with their donations. You know, there's always a number of ways that they can get involved. And so that is what we do for that particular event. But then even for the other ones, whatever we're doing, even when we're just interviewing people on our Wednesday calls, we like to ask, you know, we are discussing this issue. What is the one thing that people can do right now? You know, what is the one thing that people can think about to get and get involved that will actually lead to a tangible change? So it's not just sharing the pictures on the internet, but we are actually getting something done.
Yeah, and Louis, do you have any tips on how to craft either your message or your products, or just what you're putting out there to drive action?
Yeah, so we have a framework here that we use. I'm gonna skip over to it right here. So what we do is this is like a content brief. This example here is when you're developing messaging or marketing. This one was for Facebook ads. And what we're thinking about is these 6 steps process. So whenever you're coming up with a marketing plan or any kind of messaging, is really first you want to define what does the person that you're trying to connect with, what do they want, what's their goal? And if I were taking this Facebook example, this is for digital marketing and trying to understand businesses that want to learn Facebook ads. So what they want is they want to create more awareness. They want to connect with more customers. So that's their goal. Second is, what is their external problem? So what's the overt issue that they're facing where we can help solve it? And the reason they want more customers is they need to generate more sales, right? Is their external problem is they don't have enough customers coming in. So they're seeing a lack of sales. So that's the external problem. The internal problem, so what we're doing is we're adding all this together. We're drafting these statements. So when we do our messaging, it speaks to all of these points. And the internal problem, number 3, is probably most important because it gets to their feelings, right? How does it make them feel? And I think for many small businesses, nonprofits who are struggling because they don't have enough awareness, they don't have enough sales, well, it makes them feel inadequate, makes them feel overwhelmed and frustrated. And in some cases, maybe angry, right? Because they have such a great product or service, or they have a wonderful cause that they're trying to get out there, and they're not getting the awareness that they need. So that's how it makes them feel. Fourth is the philosophical problem. So why is this wrong? What's the macro issue here? And that usually comes down to, who basically they're trying to align with and what's stopping them from aligning. It could be competition. It could be a lack of marketing budget. So we got to figure that out. And then number 5 is who we're fighting. Who's the root cause here? Who are we fighting against? And for nonprofits, it could be ignorance. It could be lack of awareness. It could be anything that comes down to ideology that others don't agree with. And then the 6th one, this is most important because a lot of nonprofits forget about this, is even though they might not be selling a product or service, they still need ambassadors. They still need donations. They need grants. So what are you selling? What's your call to action? So when you write your messaging out, touch on each one of these components, but then at the end, make sure there's a clear call to action. Call us if you'd like to volunteer. Donate here, click this link, or sign up for an email list and become an ambassador. Those are things that you can put into your messaging, put into your content that'll help generate more interest and create action.
Mm-hmm. And even for elected officials, right? We have seen a lot of elected officials using a lot of digital tools lately, especially to connect with their constituents, or if someone's running, just with their potential voters. And going through these steps will definitely help clarity on what that action is for that moment. Now, there's a lot of educational content that is being put out, especially because of COVID. How do you think, do you think that most, do you think there's there should be a balance between the educational information or message or that is being put out there, especially during uncertain times, versus what you are trying to drive people to? Because we have seen a lot of causes, not only in the Democratic Party, but just in different organizations where there's a need and we want to help push that need out and inform people of what's happening, but it might not be relevant to either COVID or Black Lives Matter. So a lot of people have had to wait, which it completely makes sense. But have you guys seen any balance between either educational or alternate causes, or is there a balance or a prescription or recommendation that you guys have on that? I'll let Louis go first.
I think that's tricky to answer because it depends on your business and your audience and what you need to educate them on. I think if you look at most businesses out there, and we do work for a lot of local businesses here, and I'm part of 2 chambers, so I've made hundreds of calls over the last few months, and not only just local businesses, but across the nation, and spoke to people globally. And I think the education comes down to safety, first and foremost, about educating the public that your business is safe to come in, safe to visit, safe to buy from. Local example here is Spoon Trade, right down the road from me. I think some of you might know of them. They're right here in Grover Beach, and they've been working really hard during this whole pandemic. And they were open. They had truncated hours, and they were doing takeout, which they never did before. And they changed their whole business model to support that. But the whole time they were safe. They were telling us about they're wearing masks and gloves, and they're doing reservations to just pick up. So you had to set a time and a date when you go and pick up your food, and it was down to the minute. And they sent out emails and social media posts. And they didn't do it over and over again. I mean, there was some frequency there, but they mentioned it a few times, and then people went in and bought, and then that became common sense. Like, hey, I'm going to go to Spoon Trade. I'm going to get a healthy meal. It's going to be safe, and I don't have to worry about getting sick. So I think that type of education is key, especially now. It's just educating people on your policies, your hours of operations, and your safety standards.
So there isn't really there could be a separation between just educational messaging and what and your cause or your business, but ideally there would be an overlap, right, where you can talk about educate, but at the same time link it to your cause, to your business, to what you're trying to put out there. Andrea, have you noticed anything regarding either your audience craving more educational information? I know with the weekly calls that you guys have put in together, answering the call in time of COVID, how have you seen the response on that? Because there's a lot of educational information going in through that.
There is a lot going on, and I think that you always have to come back to remembering what your mission is. And this is something that, I had to learn, because there is, especially when there is something dramatic happening that is taking over the news cycle, and you have the audience and you want to share with them, but you have to remember that, perhaps this is not the mission of of what you're trying, right? You have to remember what your mission is. And so with that said, there's two things, right? One is that you have to fall back on what your organization is supposed to do. And then the second thing is, though, to not ignore what is happening, right? It is relevant. And so you have to find a way of how you can highlight the issues that your organization is working for towards with what is currently happening, because people are paying attention to what is currently happening. And so, for example, with COVID, you know, for me as a communication director, you know, I just want to get out the info about this is how you keep safe and this is what you should be doing. But really, if you dig just a little bit deeper, you realize that, well, our mission is to build a future with gender equality, right? And so you can look at how COVID is affecting women specifically in the workplace, right? Majority of them are in the healthcare industry. So how is it affecting them? You know, most of them are caretakers. So you can find that angle, and this doesn't, right, depending on what your business or your organization is, where you can merge what is happening. You can merge that, you can keep educating people while you're still furthering your mission. But you have to remember, I have to actually every now and then remind myself, like, my mission is this, right? The mission of Women's March Endless Obispo is women in the forefront, because that's what we're trying to highlight. That is the goal. And the other thing that I was gonna say is that you always will achieve or do a better job if you can make that educational piece, whatever it is, personalized. If people understand how this affects a person, if they can feel like they could be in their shoes, then you're going to have a much bigger impact than if you just put up, you know, a CDC guideline of, well, this is what you're supposed to be during the COVID crisis, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. I love that. I love that. We're going to go now into the questions and answers. So in 48 minutes, went super fast. And it's kind of taking us to the pro tip section as well. So is there any tool that you have seen or channel or anything that you recommend so far that you have found during the last couple of months that you recommend? Anything that maybe you weren't using before? I know we mentioned Zoom a little bit, but you can go into it more if you want to just talk about the different features or any other comment. But is there any other tool or channel that you have seen working more now? I'll let Louis go.
I think as far as channels go, all channels right now are just popping, right? Because people are spending more time at home, they're on social media more. So from a digital perspective, you can get to any channel and get a huge following. I think LinkedIn is one that's hugely discounted because there's just not as many people on it. There's not as many thought leaders on it. Most are on Instagram and Facebook, and LinkedIn is slowly growing, especially with the white collars and professionals on that level. As far as new tools though, especially from a technology standpoint, there's one called Descript. It's DESCRIPT.com. And it's a really cool tool. It'll take your video and it'll transcribe it and then allow you to edit your video through the transcription. So you say or and or so or whatever grammar issues you have in your speaking, you can cut those out, trim it down, and then recreate that audio. It's a pretty amazing platform. It's great for podcasting. And that's a good tool, I think, that anyone can benefit from. And I think right now they have a really good package for pricing.
Yeah, and you mentioned podcasts too. Podcasts have been really big too lately. People having a little bit more time to listen to things.
Well, it's interesting. The podcast, there was one study that showed podcast listening went down because fewer people are driving to work, right? So,
that's true.
Yeah, they're listening on their way to work. But then another study said, no, well, people are listening at home because they're spending more time at home and they're not listening in the gym, so they're listening, while they're cleaning. I was like, okay, well, the jury's still out on that one, but apparently it's still a good medium.
I know that my friends are doing puzzles while they're listening to podcasts, so there's a truth to that.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Andrea, are there any anything that you've learned during this COVID regarding communications that you could recommend? Anything you found that maybe you weren't using before or are using now?
For the most part, as far as channels, I think the Zoom was the biggest one. And then we actually, I think, completely disregarded YouTube, which now we have back up because we're sharing all those videos there. And so, that is just something that's most definitely not new, but for us, it is something that we did not utilize before and are utilizing now.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. That's true. And regarding video, there's a lot of fear and maybe unknown of the how complicated can making a video can be. Um, and in general, it's just graphics. You know how complicated banners or flyers are. Just making sure that your brand goes to like the next level on that. Do you guys have any tools, any tips on just how to jump into the creative world? Because that sometimes can help call that increase that engagement and just call more attention to what you're doing. Louis, do you have anything?
Yeah, so the last 3 years I've been on LinkedIn. I must have posted over 1,000 posts. I've had over 2.5 million views on my content. And what I realized is that quality is much more important than quantity. So I wouldn't worry so much about the quality of your video per se, or the HD, how good the background is. Like, all of that isn't as important as the content quality. What I mean by that is make sure, going back to your audience, that your message is aligned with them, that you're providing value, that you're saying and conveying something with emotion that is going to resonate with them. That's the most important thing. It's not your camera, it's not the lighting, it's not the background. All those things are good, but what's really great is having content that aligns with your audience. And I've learned that by posting thousands of posts and quibs and everything from memes to long form 1,000-word documents. And the ones that work the best are the ones that really touch the emotions of my audience. And everything else is just a waste of time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We have another question here. I know this is more of a communication in general, and COVID has made us go virtual a lot, but do you guys have any recommendations for groups that are trying to reach out to people that are not online or on Facebook? Have you found any tools or ways to continue that conversation and that contact outside of the virtual world?
We utilize email still a lot, and I would say that if people are not on social media, that still doesn't mean they're not online, right? But if they are not on social media, and there's just certain type of messaging as well that just resonates better through email, we found out that lots of fundraising is much more successful when you are using email. I think that a lot of people also get sick of the amount of emails that they get. So again, you're walking the line of when is it going to be too much. But at the same time, that is something that you can use to get your message out. I think that even people who are not on social media might be willing to meet on Zoom in smaller groups to just, catch up and talk to people. So I'm on the advisory board for the Central Coast Writers Conference. And so, they started doing these Friday meets where, Friday evening at 6 o'clock, you get together, or is it 7? Check with them. You get together and, everybody sits comfortably and has their beverage of choice, and you're talking about writing and you're catching up on, what is the latest. And so it's not necessarily, right, Facebook or Instagram. You do not have to have that account. I know that there are people who literally do not want to have a social media account, but you're still able to reach out to them. I do think in today's world, it is difficult if you do not have your audience on social media on how to reach out to them. And I think that, if you can in any way to convince them that, maybe pick the one that's going to work for you. I mean, there are different options out there. They might be actually find out that there is a lot they can gain from it as well.
Yeah, that's true. Louis, do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, so I'm a digital guy through and through, and that's where my life's been. But I'm a big believer in direct mail. I've digitalized several campaigns that sent out direct mail, and I think that's a great way to connect with people who might not be as savvy online. And then I'm an introvert. I like being behind a computer. Don't really like going out and speaking with people directly. I've overcome that fear and some of those challenges by joining local chamber groups. So you can join SLO Chamber, the South County Chamber, and that's a great way to connect with people in a one-to-one or one-to-many physically. Obviously now things aren't going in that direction, but we'll come back from this and we'll have that physical type of outreach again. So I think that's a great way to do it, speaking at local events, direct mail, and then let's not forget the phone. I mean, everyone's got a phone number and they have a phone. I think it's something like 90 to 95% of America's population has a phone. Most of those are smartphones, so they likely have email, but always good to pick up a phone and make a call. And there's few people doing cold calling now. It still does work. It's still effective. And it's still a great way to reach out and connect with people where you can't connect with them in other ways.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, I'll ask you a last question to both of you. Is there anything that you would recommend someone that is just trying to get their communications in order? Like, just who am I talking to? What kind of message I'm putting out? How am I driving people into taking action? How do I stay organized? Is there any wisdom that you would like to share from your own experiences? So it could be just breathe to a specific tool, but is there anything that you would recommend? I'll start with Andrea.
I think first you obviously have to know why you are doing what you do and what is your goal, what is the mission. And I do recommend sitting down and just writing it. And it does not have to be exhausting by any means. It can be the one sentence, for example, with the Women's March, right? We do have a mission that goes for 3 paragraphs and nobody ever remembers it. But the bottom line is that we are working towards a positive and just future for all people, right? And so you need to know what your message is, what is it important, but what's important for you to share with your community and with the world. And then as we talked about, trying to figure out who your audience is going to be. But as far as, how do you stay on target? I think that there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of digital tools out there, but it can be as simple as just printing out a monthly calendar. I have done this before, where you have visually on your desk, right, a box for each day, and you just put down a note on, I'm going to post on these days, and the theme of the post is going to be, first is educational piece, second is pay attention to this event, third one is inspirational quote, and fourth one is here is a local group that you might like. And then you can recycle that to a degree, but that at least is something that you can keep an eye on. And then the second thing, and I'm going to wrap up so Luis can also speak to it a little bit, is pick the tool that works the best for you. If you do not have the means to hire a professional, if it is on you to be running communication for the audience, you are never going to get anything done if you hate the tool. So for me, I hate Twitter. I just never connect with it. And if you look at Women's March SLO social media, then you will see that. So just make sure that you will find the audience on either one of these big platforms, but make sure it is something that you feel comfortable using and that you enjoy using, or it will just be a complete nightmare for you.
Good tip. Louis?
Yeah, those are good tips. I'm also not a big fan of Twitter. I read a lot, so it's just that little phrase, it's not enough for me. But I think, Simon Sinek really popularized the why of why you're doing your business, which is great. I think the who is really important, is who you actually doing business with and for. And the best thing you can do is qualitative interviews, is go to some of the people who you think are your audience, who could be your ambassadors or your customers, and spend 15 minutes interviewing them. The best way to do that is get on LinkedIn. You can get a free profile, and then you can just message people on there. And I'll tell you, if you message 30 people, you'll get at least 3 to 5 people that will agree to be interviewed. I did this recently with CMOs at Fortune 500 companies. I talked to the CMO of Tommy Hilfiger, of Calvin Klein, of some Expedia, some really big brands. I got on the phone for 15 minutes, and I learned a lot about what they needed and what their desires were.
Yeah.
So that's what you can do for free. I'll give you a good connection with your audience.
Yeah, that's actually a great tip that we're seeing the same thing from in the party as well. We're just asking people, so what do you think about the party? This is a safe space. Just let us know. And it's like the things that we hear are so obvious once you hear it, but we could have been worrying about something else for 3 months without realizing that the most basic things were just being missed. So I really like that. So we are getting to the end. I want to thank both of you again for just being so nice, sharing your time, your skills. We're going to be doing a follow-up of this panel with people that are interested in just learning more and just continue growing their communication team and communication skills. One thing that the reason why we wanted to do this is to add value to all the groups that we work with and that align with our values. So we're going to be continue doing things like this so people can just learn, and maybe as a community we can all learn and grow and make sure that our message gets out there. We are having an event next Saturday, July 4th, Independence Day. So for that event and many other events, you can just go to our website and check out what we're up to. But thank you so much, Andrea and Louis. Thanks to everyone that joined. We'll be doing this again soon. This is all for now. Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
A lot of fun. Thank you all. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.